sorry to see you missing out on SQ3 there. Fine margins. We saw the yellow flags as well. How much did that impact your final run?
Yeah, it definitely didn't help, but it's not for the lack of trying. We seemed like the team thought we were a lot faster than we are. Gave it everything, and that's ultimately what matters most. Is just we just run not quick enough.
Lewis Hamilton was knocked out in SQ2 at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Not because of a mistake of his own, but because of a last-minute yellow flag triggered by his own teammate, Charles Leclerc. The moment the yellow flags waved, Hamilton's push lap was destroyed. Worse, the FIA opened an investigation into whether he slowed down enough. Suddenly, he wasn't just out, he was under review. But it was after the session, off camera, that Hamilton's most powerful moment came. In rare, candid remarks, he opened up about the SF25 Ferrari's issues and his total lack of confidence in the car. You didn't hear these quotes on the broadcast, but they reveal exactly where Hamilton's mindset is now and what must change if Ferrari is serious about 2026. This is what he really said. It was supposed to be just another Friday in Interlagos. A sprint qualifying session, 20 drivers on track, and a bit of chaos expected in the usual Brazilian way. But when Lewis Hamilton rolled back into the Ferrari garage, helmet off, eyes fixed, the story had already changed. He was out in SQ2. Not because of a lockup. Not because of a technical failure. But because of a yellow flag. And not just any yellow flag, one caused by his own teammate. As the final seconds ticked down in SQ2, Charles Leclerc lost control at the bottom of the circuit, spinning out at Bico de Pato. Marshals instantly waved the double yellows. The timing was brutal. Hamilton, preparing for his last flying lap, had just started accelerating out of Junção. But under the rules, he had no choice. He lifted. The lap was over before it began. He missed SQ3 by just 70 thousandths of a second. And while the garage stayed calm, Hamilton's face told the full story. He knew exactly what that yellow flag had cost him. But what came next was even more telling. A few minutes later, FIA Race Control confirmed Hamilton was under investigation. Allegedly, he hadn't lifted enough under double yellows. Suddenly, the session wasn't just disappointing, it was legally complicated. The footage showed he lifted, but only slightly. Some pundits began speculating whether he had done the bare minimum. Penalties were on the table. The tension was rising. Eventually, the FIA issued a formal reprimand: no grid drop, no points lost. But Hamilton's mood hadn't improved. It wasn't just the incident. It was the same old pattern. A car that didn't rotate properly, a qualifying session where he lacked grip at the front, a setup that never gave him confidence. After months of fighting this Ferrari, Brazil felt like another chapter in a story with no turning point. And this time, the consequence came from the other side of the garage. Then came the comments. Quietly, away from the main press room, Hamilton spoke to selected media. And he didn't hold back. "It's the same story," he said. "Every quali this season. No confidence in the car. I can't push the way I need to." It wasn't said with frustration. It was said with precision. As if he had repeated the line too many times to feel anything new. But for fans listening closely, the meaning was clear: this car isn't evolving. And he's running out of ways to compensate. That's why this moment matters. Because Hamilton rarely shows cracks in public. But here, at a track where he's delivered countless masterpieces, he finally admitted what many feared: the Ferrari project isn't working. Not yet. Not in qualifying. And not in the moments when it counts most. These were not emotional words. They were analytical. Cold. Accurate. And as the paddock watched the rain clouds roll in for Saturday's sprint, a different kind of storm was already brewing inside Ferrari itself. The Ferrari SF25 has been a problem car all season. Its low-speed rotation is unpredictable, its balance under braking inconsistent, and on bumpy tracks like Interlagos, its weaknesses become impossible to hide. For Hamilton, these traits go directly against everything that made him dominant during his Mercedes era. He thrives with stability into corners, a responsive front end, and a platform that lets him manipulate weight transfer. The SF25 offers none of those things, not consistently, not confidently. Interlagos exposed it. On a freshly resurfaced track with poor grip, the Ferrari bucked and skipped across the bumps. In Sector 2, a driver's sector where rhythm is king, Hamilton couldn't settle the car. The steering was nervous. The rear felt disconnected. Engineers tried to raise the ride height slightly to reduce porpoising, but that only weakened the car's aerodynamic platform. It was a compromise on top of a compromise, and Hamilton was left with a car that didn't communicate. Leclerc seemed to cope slightly better. But the difference wasn't talent, it was tolerance. Leclerc has adapted to the SF25's flaws after years of driving around them. Hamilton, in contrast, is still trying to force the car into his framework, trusting his instincts, his method, his process. And that process demands feedback. He doesn't guess. He reads the balance. He feels the tires. And when the car lies to him, his pace disappears. What makes Hamilton unique is not that he asks for a better car, it's that he knows exactly how to make one better. His feedback is detailed, layered, and brutally specific. After Friday's session, his comments weren't vague. He described understeer on entry, lift-off instability mid-corner, and traction loss on corner exit, all while managing tire temps that were rising too quickly. These aren't complaints. They're blueprints for development. But Ferrari hasn't translated them fast enough. And so, race after race, Hamilton finds himself in the same scenario, fighting a car that doesn't give him a baseline to push from. He brakes earlier than he wants to, turns in later than he prefers, and exits corners with a throttle he doesn't trust. These aren't errors. They're survival habits. Even a driver as gifted as Hamilton cannot invent grip, especially when the car is built on unpredictable foundations. That's why Brazil's sprint qualifying stung so much. Because the problem wasn't just the yellow flag. It was everything leading up to it. The car was never right. The lap was never clean. And Hamilton knew deep down that even without Leclerc's spin, SQ3 was not guaranteed. That is the cost of Ferrari's failure to evolve. Not just lost positions, but lost belief. For Lewis Hamilton, every qualifying session carries more weight than just position. It is a direct measure of how far Ferrari still is from the team he envisioned joining. When he left Mercedes, he didn't come for sentiment. He came to build. But with each passing Friday, that mission is tested. Brazil wasn't an outlier, it was a symptom of a deeper reality. One where the car is consistently a step behind the level of its driver. The most difficult part? Hamilton isn't angry. He's tired. Not physically but mentally. Tired of needing miracles to get through sessions. Tired of carrying a car that resists the natural flow of his driving. There's a difference between fighting for lap time and fighting the machinery. The latter wears down even the strongest minds. And when the yellow flag appeared in Interlagos, it didn't just end a session. It symbolized the wall Hamilton keeps hitting. Inside Ferrari, there is growing tension. Not between drivers but between ambition and execution. Hamilton's arrival brought renewed pressure, global attention, and the expectation of excellence. Yet here, in the 22nd round of the season, the team still hasn't delivered a car that can compete over a single lap. The SF25 has pace in specific windows, but outside of those, it becomes fragile. That fragility is now defining the season. And as for Charles Leclerc, his spin might have been accidental, but the consequences were far-reaching. Not just because it blocked Hamilton's progress, but because it once again reminded everyone that Ferrari remains inconsistent under pressure. The data, the setups, the communication, it is all too reactive. And in a sprint weekend, where time is limited and precision is everything, that weakness gets exposed at double speed. For Hamilton, the consequence isn't just grid position. It's trust. Trust in the process. Trust in the direction. He has backed this project publicly at every turn. But inside, there must be questions. Can this team adapt fast enough? Can it respond to elite feedback with elite engineering? Right now, the answers are unclear. And as the season nears its end, those doubts become louder. Yet through it all, Hamilton remains steady. He doesn't lash out. He doesn't shift blame. He endures. Because that's who he is, a competitor who never stops believing that the next session could be the one that turns everything around. But even belief has limits. And in Brazil, that belief took another blow. When Lewis Hamilton stepped out of the car after sprint qualifying, he didn't explode. He didn't blame Charles Leclerc, didn't challenge the stewards, and didn't escalate the tension. Instead, he stood in front of the microphones and did something far more powerful. He told the truth. It's the same every time, he said. We just can't extract the pace in quali. No confidence. No connection. His words weren't meant to hurt. They were meant to clarify. He spoke of the bumps, the bouncing, and the complete lack of feedback through the steering wheel. It feels like Baku 2022 again, he said quietly, a reference no one missed. That was the race where porpoising nearly broke his back. The pain isn't physical now, but it's familiar. And it's rooted in the same failure. Ferrari cannot deliver the platform he needs to perform at the limit. Fred Vasseur, when asked, defended the team's decisions. We were running different setups on both cars. The surface was difficult. We made a call, and unfortunately, Lewis was caught out by the yellows. The words were calculated. Diplomatic. But they didn't address the larger concern that for all of Ferrari's resources, the car is still one step behind on Fridays. That's not about weather. That's about readiness. Heading into the sprint and Grand Prix, rain is expected. And in the wet, Hamilton becomes something else entirely. He doesn't need a perfect setup. He doesn't rely on peak downforce. He relies on instinct, rhythm, and courage. If the skies open up in São Paulo, expect him to rise. Not because the car suddenly improves, but because the conditions narrow the field, and Hamilton's feel for grip becomes a weapon no simulation can predict. But looking beyond Brazil, the question becomes deeper. How much longer can Hamilton wait? His contract runs through 2026. But his legacy runs much further. He didn't join Ferrari to participate. He came to transform. And right now, that transformation is moving too slowly. If Ferrari wants to keep him motivated, they must respond not with words, but with a car that speaks his language.